Okay, this is Larry Hymel, former Sports Information Director at Southeastern Louisiana University, also former Director of University Center at Southeastern Louisiana University, and now Athletic Alumni Coordinator for the Alumni Association of Southeastern Louisiana University. The glory days of Southeastern football centered around Coach Galloway's tenure from 1951 through 64. Of course, during that time period, he had one undefeated season. He had 4 conference championships. And on top of that, he was elected to the Louisiana Sports Writers Hall of Fame, both as a coach and an administrator, because after he left Southeastern, he became the first commissioner of college athletics, an overseer of the athletic programs for the state colleges and universities. A little-known fact is the fact that Coach Galloway was almost the coach of the 1958 Louisiana State University national champions. When LSU decided to make a coaching change in 1955, Galloway was coming off a fabulous 1954 season when Southeastern went 9-0 and just put up all kind of fabulous numbers offensively, defensively, and were considered one of the best teams in the nation, probably the best college division, and many people compared him with some of the mid-major schools as being one of the best teams in the country. Anyway, Galloway was promptly mentioned for the LSU job. Now, whether they passed on him or he passed on them, I don't know, but I remember reading stories that a lot of people were pushing him very strongly to be the head coach of LSU. But of course, they hired Paul Dietzel, and the rest is history. Dietzel came on to be the coach at LSU and eventually coached the national championship team in 1958. Galloway continued with a lot of success at Southeastern, had some very good teams, especially 1960 and 61, even though each team lost one ball game, they might have been just as good as his undefeated team of 1954. Coach Galloway, as I said, coached on through the 1964 season and then became commissioner of college athletics beginning in 65 and held that tenure until he retired permanently. Coach Galloway now has a street named after him here at Southeastern. He was followed in the coaching ranks by Pat Keneally and Roland Dale and Billy Brewer and Oscar Lofton until Southeastern dropped football in 1985. One of the biggest crowds we ever had was 1970 when we played Terry Bradshaw and Louisiana Tech here in probably the most memorable game in Southeastern history, at least in my opinion anyway. Bradshaw rallied Tech in the last 2 minutes to beat us 25-24, and there were a lot of controversial calls. There was probably more electricity in Strawberry Stadium that night for that ball game than any that I saw through all my years of Southeastern football. That was one of the longest trips I ever made in Southeastern football. Boise is a place that you really got to want to go to get there. And it was a big game. We played on the blue, quote, bluegrass or blue turf, and just played a well football game. I don't think they were expecting us to be that good or that physical, and we just came in and played a good ball game. It was a big win. I wouldn't rank it maybe as the top win in Southeastern history. Maybe if you consider the opponent in importance, it might have been. But as far as excitement, there were several other ball games that were probably more key as far as exciting finishes and etc. But it was a big win. It did rank in, when I did an all-time top 10 ball games, it did rank in my top 10. I can't remember right now where it was, but it deservingly fit somewhere in the top 10 ball games, at least in my opinion, in Southeastern history. Billy was a very good coach. He came here as an assistant under Roland Dale, and when Roland left, he became the head coach. And of course, Billy was, like a lot of coaches, they had a big ambition in mind, and his long-range term was to be the head football coach at University of Mississippi, where he had played college football. Very not unusual for any coach who is in the assistant ranks and wants to return to his alma mater to be the head coach. And Billy left here, went to Louisiana Tech, had some success, and then went to Ole Miss and became the football coach up there. But during his tenure here, between basically 72 and 78, Southeastern had some excellent football teams, excellent athletes, had a bunch of players who were drafted and went on to the pro ranks, led the nation in defense one of the years, and had good enough offense. That was the time of the wishbone offense, and he invented a wrinkle on it. We called it the wingbone because he actually set up a wing back, which was almost unheard of in the wishbone formation. And we just nicknamed it the wingbone, and he came up with some variations off of that. Well, much as I know about it, we had very good success in '81 and '82 under Coach Oscar Lofton, and successful. And then we just went through a slowly rebuilding period. And there was a change of staff and new recruiting and brought in an exciting offense. Joe Clark, who had also coached some of the pros, was offensive coordinator, and Southeastern began throwing the football. Not quite as much as they did in the Mummy days, but they did open it up, and they had a very good young team. They had started recruiting, but in rebuilding, they went through like 2 and 8 and 2 and 9 years, and the attendance wasn't there, and finances and the whole scenario of why should drop or shouldn't drop football. But it came to pass, and it did. I mean, whether you agree with it or not, it happened. There's nothing you can do about that. Other schools were thinking about it, but nobody else did it at that time. We did. I guess the president bit the bullet and, said, hey, we got to sacrifice football for the rest of the school. And so that happened, and it stayed that way for about 18 years. But that was just a decision that was made by the administration. They didn't ask for a public vote. They asked for a public referendum. The public vote was supposed to be in dollars, and they didn't get enough at that time to bring back football. Well, I mean, you have a certain segment, a small a group that's gonna hit hard. The former football players and then the students. It just wasn't an overwhelming onrush of students, former players, former alumni, or whatever, to ballot enough to save it at that time, And true to, as I mentioned, Coach Galloway before, he and the guys that played for him, the former football players, kept that dream alive through all the years. They started having an annual get-together. It started out with the 60 and 61 ball clubs, just having an annual get-together every year after football died, and then they slowly stretched it out, and they, included the 63, 64, the 59, the 60, and then eventually it became a total former football players association, which still exists today. It's very active, and they worked real hard to bring back football and never let the thought die. And finally, they got a president in, Dr. Sally Clausen, and who told them that she would work for football, but she had some other areas, academic areas, that she had to align first. But true to her word, as soon as she got things in place, she started working towards getting the necessary funding to bring back football. And eventually, of course, it became a reality. Ooh, that's a tough question. And I don't know that I have a specific answer right off the top of my head. I mean, you can think about games. You can think about events, you can think about people. It's just, I don't know if there is a true answer to that. I have just a lot of fond memories of a lot of things through the years. I don't know that one thing sits at the top that isolates itself from everything else. Probably the most proudest thing was when they inducted me into the Southeastern Athletic Hall of Fame as an honorary member for service to Southeastern. I was sports information director for 28 years, the first full-time sports information director, and that's an honor that will never go away, and thankfully, and now I get to work in another area with the Hall of Fame as the athletic alumni coordinator, and one of my responsibilities there is to help with the Hall of Fame every year, and that's a labor of love. But yeah, that's the one thing that would probably stick out in my mind as a total Southeastern thing to me, because it's a tremendous honor, as big as honor as I've ever received.
During those 18 years at